cool. Well, thank you for joining, everyone. Just want to give an extra 5 minutes for people that may have busy schedules. So just to sort of introduce ourselves here. So obviously, thank you for attending. It's going to be an introduction to digital monitoring, essentially. So giving you an outline of exactly, what appropriate monitoring looks like in the FE space. So just for introductions, my name is Sean Lazenby. I look after further education as a sector for Smoothwall. So basically onboarding our customers onto this service. So yeah, I'm sort of well versed in what the requirements are in the market. And today we've got Jack with us. So Jack is digital monitoring specialist. So basically he helps onboard all the customers in terms of onto the service, so sees the sort of challenges you might have, and is a good sort of technical resource as well. So thanks for coming, Jack.
Thank you.
No worries. So to get things started, so what we're going to discuss today, essentially, as you'd expect, we're going to talk about digital monitoring, what it is, how does it work, so the sort of trials and tribulations of what you might see in your environment, and how this can essentially, improve and make your safeguarding procedures internally more robust. So how digital monitoring can spot students at serious risk. So obviously that is the sort of main aim here, to help with students who are potentially seen as high risk, how we deploy it in college environments. So talk about, from an IT perspective, how sort of simple it is to roll it out versus things like web filtering, where obviously you've got lots of services going on, and this is very straightforward. So again, we'll talk about that. How it benefits DSLs, SLTs, and IT teams. So again, we'll touch on how it sort of brings a line between the two teams, so you're not reliant on IT providing reports and things of that nature. And then any questions you have. So basically at the end, what we'll do is we'll have a Q&A session. So basically you'll be able to submit questions, and we'll answer them for you. Obviously we've got some pre-done ones as well. From housekeeping point of view, if you do have to sort of drop out with a busy schedule, not a problem, we are recording it. So from there you can just get in touch, and we can send you the full recording of the webinar itself. And yeah, we'll have a few polls as we go along as well. So basically a bit of interaction around what sort of questions we see, and get your sort of feedback on that. So hopefully that all makes sense. And like I say, between myself and Jack, we'll go through each sort of slide and give you sort of information around how the service works. So digital monitoring, what is it? Obviously over the past, I'd say sort of 5 years, it's really sort of become prominent in terms of safeguarding, even more so with things like COVID. But basically what we're going to be, what a service like this offers you is, as it says there, identifying students at risk based on what they do, say, or share. So that's on their digital lives, not necessarily physical, when you can see them and get a feeling for what's going on with that student. And like you say, a lot of these things go unnoticed. So from a safeguarding perspective, through legislation and things of that nature, it makes it a really robust situation to have something like proactive monitoring in place. And like I say, at the bottom there, it's a virtual assistant essentially. So it's helping you do your job. It's not going to replace DSLs. It's very much about speeding up situations where you're looking at things like incident to action. So a lot of the time what we see is a sort of delayed response potentially between an incident happening and then a DSL being able to action that. The whole sort of premise here is providing you core bits of information that you can go and deal with that student in a timely manner. And obviously from a risk point of view, again, it's just giving you the tools to understand what's going on in that particular student, and obviously just covering everything on that particular device. So how it works. Jack, do you want to jump in, sir?
Yes, please. So all monitoring starts out with a device that has got a monitoring client installed on it. Monitor is able to cover Windows devices, Mac devices, Chromebooks and iPads. And as we can see from that first image, all of them start with somebody, a pupil or even a staff member, typing something into that device. Once something has been typed into that device, the next thing that we can see, if you can just give it a click, Sean, is that the words or phrases will trigger an alert. And that will get sucked up into our AI system, and it'll be a combination of what the student has typed and the screenshot as well. The third part of the stage, if you could give another click, Sean, is that the AI assesses the thing that has been typed, and it's going to analyze it and decide whether it's high risk or if it's low risk. If it's high risk, it's going to go into a team of humans, and that team of humans will double check that the AI has been correct in assessing it as high risk. And if so, they'll come and pass it straight to your DSL. You as a user of Monitor and as DSLs have got control over how you are alerted to these different things. But broadly speaking, high level concerns, as you can see from that image, they're going to make your phone buzz. We'll give you a phone call to alert you within just a couple of minutes of the concern. You also have choice of whether you get an email about a concern or not. So yeah, you've got good control over that. If the team of humans assess it as low risk, or if the AI assesses it as low risk, it's going to go into your monitoring dashboard. And as you can see from the final point, if we can have that last click, please, Sean, it will also get logged into your linked record keeping system. CPOMs, my concern, or safeguard what we've stored. So broadly speaking, something is typed, the AI passes that initial assessment, which then goes to a team of humans to double check before then coming to you by phone and email if it's high risk, or straight to your dashboard if it's low risk. And you've also got the choice of putting all of this into your linked record keeping system.
Cool, thanks, Jack. So yeah, so just to add in a bit on that sort of element. So the key thing here, obviously, we will talk about it on another slide, but it's about not relying and understanding the difference between a monitoring service and a web filter. So it's it's making sure that these incidents that are happening potentially offline on the device that was obviously college owned. So you're pushing out a lot of laptops, etc., whether it's Mac or Windows, whatever it might be. And those laptops are going home. It's we've seen through COVID that the sort of working from home aspect is reached new heights, as it were. So from that, obviously, we've got a lot of traction around what we could do off site and make sure these devices were safeguarded as well. So like Jack said, it's looking at the behaviors, it's looking at ultimately how people interact, building profile in terms of understanding that they're doing work versus doing something extremist or anything like this. So it's about enabling the DSLs essentially. So basically giving them the information and the empowerment that they can go and review these incidents and then act on them efficiently. So the way that it sort of works beneath this sort of sort of top level sort of view is that you'll get alerts based on a sort of 1 to 5 rating. So obviously 5 being the most severe, and this is all documented. So the great thing about the service is that everything is written down, so you'll know exactly why we're contacting you, exactly why it's related to a specific category. Obviously the categories are all in line with the legislation, keeping children safe in education. So everything from self-harm to vulnerable people to extreme and terrorism and things like that. So from a Ofsted legislation, you are really having the most robust safeguarding procedures you can get on the market essentially. So that's worth noting. And yeah, essentially when you've got people potentially looking at things late at night, again, that device is yours. So you're sort of like you have to look after that from a device point of view. So again, no matter what the time, these devices will be getting monitored, and yeah, essentially you'll be receiving alerts based on a sort of 1 to 5 procedure. It's all outlined, you'll know exactly why. And yeah, that's sort of how we sort of work it when it comes to why are we alerting you, why are we sending this through, why have we raised this as a concern. So in situations you might have, like I say, someone searching on drugs, things like that, but we can contextualize that and say, actually, you know, they're not searching for drugs specifically, because, you know, when the moderation team are looking, they can see tabs open for presentations, for documents, whatever it might be, and then just get more contextual information around that, as opposed to sending you false positives. Because the whole aim of the system is not to give you more of a workload, it's to, you know, reduce that, and like I say, give you core bits of information around your students so that you can act on it accordingly in that fashion. And, you know, things like the searching on drugs, you know, we might flag that as a sort of lower level, something in the portal to say, look, you know, it's not really an issue, but this has happened. And then if an incident does happen later on where they are, you know, they're searching for drugs with intent, then it can sort of help build a bigger picture for you, so you can understand exactly what's going on. And the alerts themselves, you know, you'll get screenshots, you'll get information, everything you can think of in terms of the device, what's going on. And, you know, like I say, the whole premise here is that if they're doing things on that device, you can go and basically deal with the situation whilst it's still happening, as opposed to a sort of delayed approach where, you know, typically what I see with customers before they had a service like this would be that, you know, obviously they'd have to stop what they're doing, go speak to IT, get some reports, look through all the reports, identify the incident, and then go and speak to the student at hand. And obviously that time frame just expands, especially if things come up or whatever it might be. So yeah, so it's all about alerting you in a timely fashion, you know, in a sort of near immediate fashion, that you can go and deal with that situation there and then.
I think the point you made, Sean, about the student searching for drugs is particularly prevalent in FE. In secondary, we do see students who are searching for things that a non-moderated, a solely keyword-based monitoring system would squawk at. And I think even in secondary, that really highlights the value of the moderators being able to take that contextual understanding of what the student is doing and apply that to the leveling decision to decide whether this student searching for drugs is a critical threat that safeguards need to be aware of immediately, or if it's something that should be, as you've said, lower level to begin to form that pattern of behaviour. But as we move into FE and students start to search for things that would particularly panic something that is just keyword based, I think the value of moderators there able to apply that contextual understanding is absolutely essential, so that you aren't having to trawl through reams of alerts from your nursing students who are searching for things with alarming keywords or other similarly potentially concerning topics. Whilst we've been talking about this, we've had a couple of questions in actually that I thought would be worth discussing live. So the first one was who receives alerts, and we've been talking about DSLs receiving alerts, but it can be anybody really that the DSL feels is appropriate to receive an alert. Monitor gives you good ability to decide an alert recipient based on who the person is. So we can have group-based rules in secondary, common for year groups, but in FE, it's quite common for sites. So students who attend a particular site to feed their alerts to a given recipient, or it might be a course or subject-based alert routing decision. Let's send alerts from the nursing school to the DSLs who work with that. So yeah, who receives alerts is entirely up to you. Our second question was, does it cover searches on student devices at home using home Wi-Fi? And again, Sean, I think this is something that you touched on. Where a school or a college provide a device to a student, the responsibility is with the device provider to make sure that the access to that device is safe. So helpfully, Monitor does cover searches on monitored devices, regardless of where the person is. So if the person's at home, absolutely top quality monitoring there, exactly the same as if they were in college. And as Sean alluded to, it's 24/7 as well. So no worries about it ticking past 5:30 or whenever our moderators might stop and missing that alert, because yeah, it's 24/7 and does not mind where the student is. It will continue to provide that good quality of monitoring.
Yeah, and just to add to that point, finally, is, you know, obviously during COVID, when, you know, DfE were pushing out devices and things like this when everyone was homework, and that's where we saw, you know, a huge spike in terms of you know, being able to safeguard these students at home on the devices that you've provided. So yeah, 100%, doesn't matter what it's connected to, as long as it's on the internet, it's going to monitor and make sure that you know, nothing sort of bad untoward happens.
And actually, just on that point, even if they're not connected to the internet, monitoring is still active.
Right.
It's still making sure that what they're doing is safe. And the moment they reconnect to the internet, it will send those alerts through to us, and we will process them for you.
Lovely. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
So yeah, that segues nicely into the sort of the biggest challenge or the biggest question or understanding around what digital marketing is, monitoring, not marketing, monitoring is with web filtering, and what are the differences. So obviously, you're going to have a web filter in place. You might have Smoothwall, you might have, one of the many sort of vendors that are available out there. The key thing to mention as well, just before we even start, is that you don't need to have Smoothwall's web filtering to do this. It is vendor agnostic, so you can, I've got some customers that don't use our filter and that will use this service, so you don't have to worry about things intertwining and whatnot. But yeah, the biggest difference is essentially the offline piece. So if you imagine again a scenario, people using Word documents, obviously that's not online. You're going to pick up these bits of information. So typically we see a lot of incidents around things that have been typed out in a Word doc. Obviously that's not sent anywhere, but we're picking that up. Obviously your web filter would require that to have to be sent. So that's where it really comes to promise in terms of the scale that this service offers you. So it's basically, there is no hiding essentially. There's also things like, if someone goes on twitter.com and they type out a bad tweet, but then they decide not to post it, we're still going to see that sort of information. So there might be a radicalized sort of tweet that they've typed out but decided not to. We're going to pick that up, obviously flag it, and it doesn't have to have been sent on the web. So that's the sort of the scope that the service gives you. So you've sort of got your web filter, and then this sits above that, giving you that grander scale. It's not going to replace your web filter, because obviously you need to do the blocks and things like this in terms of your block or allow list, whatever that may be, however that's configured. This is just contextualizing around situations that are not necessarily web-based, and that is the biggest sort of element where people think, well, I've got a web filter, I don't necessarily need a monitoring service, but it just gives you that full transparency of exactly what's happening on the device. And like I said, you can put this service in no matter what web filtering you currently have as an incumbent, and that's the sort of biggest understanding of what the differences are. Because like I say, you'll get some people who just think web filtering's fine, it's not a problem. Like with ours, for example, we have like some safeguarding alerts built in, but they're still web-based, so you're not getting that true view of exactly what's going on, and the behaviors, any risks of the students and things like this. So that is the biggest difference between the two. Anything you want to add, Jack? Or?
I think there's the alerting aspect to think about as well. People often rely on alerts that come from web filters as their main way of knowing if there is something occurring in the digital life of a student that they should know about. And the alerts that we see come from Monitor are quite a lot more valuable than the alerts that we see come from the Smoothwall filter or really any other filter. Filters will panic and will alert you the moment somebody has any element in a web page blocked. So if a student has a gambling advert blocked that they've not seen, the web filter will still come and tell you about that, often unable to distinguish whether the student attempted to access that gambling content or whether the student accessed different content and simply had that gambling content blocked. By the digital monitoring solution being more intent focused, if the student was seeking gambling content, for example, the monitoring system could give you more valuable information about that than the web filter could. There's also the moderation part to think about as well. Web filters do not pass the alerts that they send to you through a moderation process, which means that you're receiving that unfiltered stream of information about all the sites people have had blocked access to, versus the monitoring, the moderated monitoring alerts, which have been sense checked by that team of humans who understand what it is your students are learning about, for example, so they can make sure that the things that they're telling you about are leveled appropriately in proportion to the things that they are learning about.
Yeah, and I think you can argue the sort of the approach with using a web filter for your your full safeguarding requirements is more of a reactive way of dealing with it versus what this would be, which would essentially be proactive in terms of the monitoring. So again, from legislation, we'll touch on legislation in a minute, but legislation, Ofsted, you're putting in the most robust service you physically can. You know what I mean? That is what it comes down to at the end of the day. And you could also argue that you know, like we have situations where, you know, I've spoke with customers where we'll do meetings, and you know, IT and the DSLs will be there. You can argue that web filtering obviously is an IT function, but monitoring obviously is a DSL function, so it's not necessarily relying on IT for these things. And some of the feedback that we've had is that, you know, IT are maybe seeing things they don't want to see, that they're not sort of trained to see, and ultimately what this service will do is draw that line between the two teams. So essentially, obviously, the web filtering managed by IT, the monitoring, all these alerts will be sent off to the DSLs and the safeguarding team. So you've got that sort of line drawn between, so people aren't seeing things they don't want to see, you know, whatever it might be. But yeah, it really does draw that line, because you can basically configure it in a way that says, right, I'm an IT person, and I can log on, and, you know, we can see the devices and the health of the device, for example's sake, but they can't see any alerts. And then the safeguard team will log on, see all the alerts, but they won't see vice versa, etc. So yeah, just worth noting on that. That's the sort of you know, a big plus point is that it does draw that line between the two teams, and it's not something that has to necessarily hang over IT's head, that they can, you know, just basically, there's a service in place that will send alerts directly to safeguard, and so no longer having to, you know, pull reports, look at this, look at that, and see things that maybe they shouldn't. Right, so onto the Keeping Children Safe in Education guidance. Obviously, you're fully aware of the legislation. I'm not going to sort of teach you to suck eggs or anything like that, but it's just to sort of, you know, hit home in terms of what it is obliged, or what you're obliged to sort of look at. It's to ensure they have appropriate filtering and monitoring systems in place, and regularly review their effectiveness. So again, as I've said all the way through, you know, this is a robust way of doing it. This is, you know, Ofsted look extremely favourable in doing proactive monitoring. And then, like I say, you've got you know, a lot of sort of elements with obviously with COVID and the mental health. So again, from a full scope point of view, managing those devices at home and safeguarding those devices at home, that's another sort of element that is sort of thrown into the mix. And yeah, Jack, you got anything to sort of add to that?
I think your point about the COVID changing our attitudes to digital monitoring and the guidance and legislation reflecting that is a good one. That volume of devices that we saw going home with students, and suddenly they were all connected all the time, has led to what we've seen here, this requirement to have appropriate monitoring systems in place. Yeah.
So, and like I say, it's all in line when it comes to, you know, obviously you receive alert, it'll be based on a person, it'll be based on a category, and all those categories, as I mentioned previously, everything, you know, you've got self-harm, vulnerable person, cybersexing, extremism, terrorism, things like that. Everything that is sort of outlined in the legislation is in line with the alert you will receive. So again, you're going to know exactly why we're contacting you. And this is why Ofsted look on it so favourably, because it is all in line with UK legislation. Obviously, we are a UK business, so this is our sort of bread and butter in terms of the market that we deal with, in terms of development, in terms of changes to legislation, in terms of anything you can imagine. You know, obviously we're not an American-based company that is sort of playing catch up with what's going on over here. It's very much a case of any changes that are made in the UK domain. You know, we will be on top of that, and we will already be speaking to, you know, the Department for Education, you know, all the relevant bodies to make sure that our service is in line with where you know, the changes are going to potentially happen. You know, for example, say if they added new categories into you know, the service, it will be based off legislation, for example's sake. So, you know, just for peace of mind on that front as well, you will you know, you've got a focused business here that is, you know, essentially a safeguarding vendor, and you know, that is what we do on a day-to-day basis. And then again, in line with the Safety Internet Centre, so I've mentioned the sort of phrase proactive. So this is where you know, you can see where you actually sit. Again, it's all written there for you, so you can understand what type of safeguarding procedures you have right now and you're offering. So typically with colleges, you know, physical monitoring, unless it's a special college that maybe has a total of 30 pupils in total, that's not really going to be applicable. I'd say, the majority of people sit at number 2, which is the active monitoring, which is essentially, web filtering. So it's just looking at the web-based sort of elements. And then finally, you've got the proactive monitor, which is doing, again, everything you sort of possibly can, and everything we've sort of outlined as we've been along. So again, from Ofsted perspective, if you're doing proactive monitoring, which is their top level, again, that puts you in good stead with the sort of reviews and things of that nature. And yeah, that's sort of it when it comes to the Safety Net Centre. Like I say, they redefined this because they had left it maybe a little bit grey. So they redefined it. I think it was sort of in the past sort of 12 months, and essentially, making sure that your monitoring strategy is in sort of line with, web filtering and things like that, and just saying, look, you can upgrade the service that you have by implementing something like what we have in terms of the human moderator team service with the human moderator. Sorry. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Jack, you anything to add? Or?
I think what really separates point 2 and 3 is whether you have got the capacity to be monitoring the output of that system, although I'm mixing my words there, to be keeping on top of what the system has outputted. Point 2, if you've got that large team who are able to interpret what is coming out of your unmoderated system or your web filter, perfect. You can probably make point 2 work for you. But where the moderated system comes into its own is where you don't have that specialist in-house knowledge and that time to dedicate to sifting through the output of those 2 systems and collating together what they've found.
Yeah, and the scale is obviously a topic as well. So thinking, if you're at a college that has 5,000 students, 10,000, we've got customers that are sort of 10, 12, 15,000 students. Obviously, a team of maybe 4, 5 DSLs, that is a lot of work to get through if you don't have something like this. So again, it's all about freeing their time up in the correct fashion with the correct alerts. And like I say, from a scale perspective, it's not an issue either, because we've got customers on the service right now who are sort of at the top end of those user ranges, as it were. Right, so poll. So we're going to do a poll now. Jack's grinning. We're going to get a poll done. So I'm going to launch a poll, and then feel free to submit your results, and we'll have a little talk. But basically, this one's about concerns. So I'll just launch that now and give it a minute or so. See what the results are in.
Yeah, this is a poll that we've been doing kind of quite consistently for the last couple of years, and it's interesting to see how the topics that people worry about most have changed over time. Yeah, and to try and kind of collate that with what we're seeing in the news and what it is that people are worried about.
About 30 seconds there, so we'll end that. So yeah, so top views here are mental health and bullying and violence. So that's sort of in line with the consistency of previous polls. So
it is that said, kind of over COVID, we were seeing a really big worry about online sexual abuse, and I think the worry was that students would be sat with these newly provided devices without a great deal of education about how to use them online in conversation with people who we didn't know. And it's interesting to see how the numbers have moved away from that, potentially caused by that change in legislation, that requirement on schools to ensure that they are providing more robust defenses for the devices that they are providing.
Yeah, especially with the self-harm as well, that sort of element, and that not necessarily just being web-based, because those are the sort of situations where you see people writing documents, notes, whatever it might be, and it's not web-based, and like I said, you're going to pick those things up and be able to deal with them, because otherwise it would just be sort of unseen. But yeah, thank you for the first poll. We've got another one coming up shortly, so I'll just move on. So right, so the iceberg effect. So it looks a lot in terms of the sort of information there in front of you. I'm not going to read every single one out, but the general sort of gist is that, as you can see there, risks you can see and risks you can't see, and ultimately, falling in categories of offline risks and digital risks. So what you've got, obviously, you'll see things like, changes in behavior is a student struggling. You've got your record management software to keep track of things like, injuries, bruises, whatever that might be. Whether they're off, absenteeism, things like that. But those are the things you can see and you can deal with, through a physical sort of nature. It's where the bottom of the iceberg comes into play, are the things that you just have no sort of idea about. So again, you've got things like, as you can see there, you've got online conversations. We've sort of touched on that in terms of maybe people speaking to each other. You can pick up on those things. And essentially, again, they'll fall in line with the sort of categories that we have, as you can see, like drugs, extremism, etc. Obviously, a lot of back and forth conversations happen, but like I say, they are tracked by the categories themselves. We've got things like incels, obviously, extremism, far right, whatever it might be, far left. It's a case of, again, you getting an understanding of, what people's viewpoints are and seeing things that, you wouldn't have necessarily seen. Bullying and violence. Sorry, mate.
Sorry, Sean. I was just going to say, we've seen a change in legislation as well, which I think has highlighted the necessity to try and see those things that you can't see. What stuck with me was Ofsted saying that you must assume that peer-on-peer abuse is taking place in your school, even if you cannot comprehend how it could, which to me really highlights that need to be able to see the bottom of that iceberg.
Yeah. And that's, like Jack says, DfE Ofsted, obviously big on the sort of child-on-child abuse, because, you have to just assume that, that is happening in the background, unfortunately. But again, you're putting in the provisions, making sure that, you're doing everything possible to alleviate that from a bigger situation. Oversharing personal information. People might be a bit, obviously, younger, so a bit naive when it comes to that sort of thing. So again, you'll be able to keep track of, people providing addresses, phone numbers, whatever, just like, making sure that, this information is not being shared with the wrong people, that, whether it's strangers or anything. Again, you're sort of delving into the sort of the true badness of, the sort of digital world. And that's why it's sort of imperative that you can, make sure that if these things are happening on the devices that you provide, that you can sort of counteract that and deal with them in the correct fashion. You've then got,
I think a web filter can help you spot some of this. A web filter could tell you that a student has been to a chat room. A web filter could potentially tell you that a student has been searching for harmful images, but the web filter would struggle to help you understand the severity of the situation, or to give you the quality and quantity of information that monitoring system could.
As well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. So you get the sort of general sort of understanding there of what the iceberg effect is and how we sort of put it together. It's just basically making sure that you have that full visibility of exactly what's going on in that digital world for the students you have there at the college, protecting them and making sure that there are any sort of high risk situations they can be dealt with. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the iceberg effect. I think one sort of part that we want to sort of look at would be coming up now, which would be the myths. So the sort of myths of the situation, the understanding of this type of service, what it offers, and ultimately we'll bounce back and forth between myself and Jack, but obviously the first one, will I be bombarded with false positives? This is the biggest question I get asked, because people think that ultimately they hear alerts, they hear oh, I'm gonna have more of a workload. This isn't sort of bearable. The whole concept of the system is not to bombard you with false positives. The situation where you will get false positives is if you have a monitor that essentially is an algorithm and it can't contextualize around a situation. So making sure that if someone, if you've got a sort of monitor that just isn't human moderated and it's just relying on the algorithm, you're going to have things coming through like, Middlesex, whatever it might be, any sort of double entendres, as it were. But it's just sort of, the whole concept here is to give you core bits of information to go and deal with. So, if you're receiving an alert, it's gonna be, your level fours, especially in a college with older students and things like that, your level fours, you want to receive those alerts, and they won't be false positives. They will be bits of information where, someone has been talking about suicide to someone, or someone has been doing X, Y, and Z in relation to, one of the categories. It's these alerts that come through are the sort of the top end of information that you will receive, as opposed to, oh look, someone's been swearing or whatever, and you're just getting bombarded with them. They're going to be, it's going to be, quality over quantity when it comes to these situations. And obviously they're all linked to your students. So, from your perspective, you're going to want to see the, level 3s, level 4. You can configure it if you want to, maybe just focus on level 4s and 5s, but obviously level 5 is a real severe situation. Someone, for example's sake, on a vulnerable person has threatened, their own life, essentially. You're going to receive a phone call about that situation to say, this person on this device has just said this, and then the DSL can go deal with it right there and then. And like I say, going back to the sort of time frame, that's where it really comes into play, because if someone is thinking like that, the first thing you don't want to have to go to IT. Obviously, you may not even see it if it was offline, but you don't want to have to go IT, pull reports, look at this, do that, and then go deal with it. You want to just go and have to deal with it straight away, essentially, make sure that incident is dealt with, and you can take the appropriate sort of actions from that.
And at the other side of the scale, we could kind of contrast that with a student who is searching for content about drugs. I think your slightly more basic monitoring system would spot that and would spot reference to a drug term and would immediately scream to you about it. One of the selling points of a moderated system is that the person who reviews that content at the provider side is able to see the context that surrounds that. The previous searches made by the user, they can see that the user is being led towards a study on addiction or something like that, perhaps. They can also use the screenshots that have been taken to see that information has been taken from those drug searches and being put into a report about the effects of addiction. And you will still be told about it, just at a much, much lower level than the unmoderated system, which will come and scream to you that someone is trying to do something that we wish they wouldn't. So it's about the context. Being able to see that full context means that we can not give you false positives, and as Sean illustrated, we can give you rapid alerts for the serious stuff.
Yeah, exactly that, Jack. It's just it's to make a DSL, a DSL's role more efficient and more straightforward in terms of alerts coming through without necessarily having to do 3, 4, 5 things before they can go and action it.
I can spot a segue coming up there to, does this replace the role of a DSL?
Exactly. There you go. So does this replace the role of a DSL? No, it complements it. Obviously, it's like we said previously in the slide, it's a sort of virtual assistant of, we're not replacing the skill set of a DSL. We're basically giving them the information to empower them and go and do the great job that they do already. You know what I mean? So it's just basically, as we've sort of said as we've been along, giving them, empowering them, making them have a robust process that means they can go and deal with these situations right there and then. I could sit here and give you sort of anecdotes around, what I've seen in other colleges, but you can just imagine the sort of interceptions we've made when it comes to things like self-harm, comes to things like extremism and cyber sexing and things like this. It's not it's sort of worth its weight in gold once you sort of, if you have a service like this, because you understand what it offers. But no, it's not to replace, it's not to say, you put this service in, you don't need a DSL team. It's all about empowering the DSL to do their job even more efficiently than what they're doing at the moment.
Just a question actually about dealing with. Sorry, Sean.
Is anything to add to that, or?
We've had a question actually, which kind of quite nicely dovetails into that, about who deals with false positives. Does it lead to extra work for DSLs? So for thinking about dealing with false positives, the intention of the moderators of a moderated system is to reduce the burden that false positives puts onto the DSLs by making sure that we aren't raising those bits of work that, whilst could contain alarming phrases, are permitted and led. By dealing with those in, not going to shout to you about them, not making your phone ring to tell you that a student is searching for cannabis, that does reduce the work of DSLs. Nice and easy.
Yeah, so thanks, Jack. So that's the whole point. The false positive element is removed by the human moderation team. That is the sort of general sort of situation here, that yes, you might get level 1s and 2s coming through, but then not going to, as Jack says, make noise to you. It's very much a case of, if you had to review a specific student at some point because they've had, let's say, 3 level 4s, then you might sort of delve down into the level 1s and 2s and see how they've sort of progressed to that point. So no, you won't get bombarded with the false positives. The false positives are essentially removed by the human moderation team, and that's why when it comes to monitoring services, when you're relying on the software algorithms, that's where you get your false positives. This service will not bombard you with that. It will give you true bits of pressing information that need to be dealt with in a timely manner. Thank you for that question, much appreciated. Sorry, I should see, I keep missing the little dot telling me we've got one, so sorry about that, Jack. Can it spy on children through their webcams? Jack, you want to take this one?
No, no, it cannot. It has no mechanism to delve into a webcam and open it up. It's not able to do that. There is a situation, though, that is worth thinking about. So it could be that a student is in a chat room, and we won't list them, but we're aware of these places where people can go and people can converse with strangers with the webcam open. And it is possible that a student could enter a trigger word whilst they have their webcam open. But as you would expect from a monitoring provider, we've got an extremely robust process to make sure any kind of CSAM material is handled in the way that you would expect. It is rapidly deleted and is not shared with anybody. So no, it can't spy on children through their webcams, and we've got robust processes to handle any material of that nature.
Cool, thank you, Jack. Is it breaching a child's right to privacy? So this is where the sort of you've kind of got the mandate, the legal duty to do that already when it comes to your devices. So obviously you're not spying on people with BYOD, bring their own devices in. This is focused on college-owned devices, and like I say, from a mandate legal perspective, you're encouraged to make sure that device is protected, is safeguarded. So no, it doesn't breach their right. Obviously it's a balance, but from a perspective of the legalities, the legislation and things like that, no, it's not going to be breaching the privacy of that child, given the medium that they're using here in this situation.
Yeah, I think it's about being proportional. Monitoring systems are based off active triggers, use of keywords, that sort of thing. Monitoring systems are not constantly logging somebody's location by GPS or constantly running a video feed of what the student is looking at. That they are alerting you to use of concerning words and phrases and behaviours. And it's that concern versus that permanent omnis surveillance that does make it proportional. And as Sean has mentioned, that legal backing, that duty imposed on you by the government to make sure devices that you provide are used safely and securely, that gives you the mandate to do that.
Lovely. Thank you, Jack. Next one, I don't need monitoring, I have web filtering. I think we've pretty much covered that sort of element, but like I say, it's recommended to look at the proactive monitoring. And I think the key thing for you or people that maybe are just having web filtering do it is, as we've mentioned, the full transparency of exactly what's going on. So I think we've pretty much covered that one.
We have a colleague once described it in a way that I quite liked as being like trying to sort of secure your house. You need that multi-layered approach. Your web filter is absolutely essential to keep people off stuff, but just in the same way that you might have CCTV at your house and you might have a neighborhood watch scheme and you might have a a guard dog and a burglar alarm and window locks and all these other things, it is useful to have more than just a single tool to make sure that people who are using the equipment you've provided are doing so safely.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. And finally, do you send risks to the government? In sort of simple terms, no. We're not going to involve any sort of government bodies with that. Obviously, that's your information, your data that we're giving to you essentially. So in short, no, it's all maintained between ourselves in a relationship with you as a customer. But no, it won't be getting sent off to anything random like MI5 or anything like this. It's for you guys to deal with, and essentially from that, things will occur. Jack?
Exactly. Under data protection law, we are a data processor on your behalf as a data controller, and that doesn't give us the permission to make decisions on your behalf.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll stay with obviously, your SLT, and that's where it sort of goes. So obviously the contacts that we have that we're working with, traditionally head of student services, DSLs, IT directors, etc. And then the information is passed on to the appropriate people, and then you will deal with that. So we'll never overstep our boundary by doing something like that, because this is a tool, as we've said throughout, to empower the college to safeguard in the sort of top sort of fashion when it comes to those things. So those are the myths. We've got another poll now. So the poll now is operational. So we'll be what are your biggest concerns around the operational side of digital safety? So I'm going to launch that, and please get involved. Should have read the last one out. I didn't. I just launched it. Apologies, Jack. Okay, so I've got some coming through. Okay. Just let that run for another 10 seconds or so. But yeah, I'm seeing obviously some the sort of top elements. I'll just end that poll. So yeah, so obviously limited budget. We understand this. That has been one of the sort of biggest sort of hurdles, because we were transitioning from maybe people not having set aside budgets for safeguarding from the government, etc. and whatnot. What we do see is once when it comes to maybe IT's budget, this is more coming out of safeguarding's budget and things like that. So there can be sort of ways, but yeah, quite interesting there. And lack of time and resource. Yeah, fully understand that. I think the key thing there is that it's going to improve that time in the resource as well. So by doing something like this, it's actually going to counter argument that sort of element where ultimately you will have time for it, because you're not stuck with false positives and things of that nature, as we've sort of been through. But anything to add, Jack? Or
no, to be honest, slightly conscious of time in a way that's appropriate for the result of that poll. I think we've got about 8 minutes left, and we've still got some stuff to talk about.
Okay, we'll skip on them. Right, practicalities. So Jack, do you want to sort of lead on this one?
Yeah, so I think Monitor brings benefits for both of these kind of broad separate teams of people. To think about IT first, anybody who has got experience in your team of deploying software to Windows devices will be pretty at home deploying Monitor. You'll hop into group policy through AD, you'll hop into SCCM or Intune or anything that is able to push out that MSI and to put a couple of keys into registry. It's going to work perfectly. As you'll know from deploying extensions to Google Workspace, that is a sort of 2-minute job at most. For Macs, just stick it in your MDM system, deploy it, it'll work perfectly. And same thing for iPads. Put Monitor into your MDM system and you'll deploy that replacement browser. So super easy, super quick. And once it's out there, because analysis is taking place in the cloud, there is very little requirement to keep that, to constantly have to touch that client. It's going to sit in the background and work perfectly. And similarly, and nice and easy for DSLs, for those who might want to work across multiple sites, if you think you might want to split Monitor up in that way, campus by campus, you've got good tools to make sure central management is quick and easy and it is full of as much detail as you want it. You've got the option to go and regularly check on alerts that have been generated at a lower level for students. You can be searching by level, you could search by student. obviously always being notified directly of those higher risk levels. And as you would expect, you've got choice over what is high level to you and what is low level. And to sort of neatly fit in with one of the concerns raised in the poll, that's going to give you time back. By not having to sift through those reams of false positives, you can focus on the thing that you have been trained to do as a DSL and go and spot those problems. And having that extra pair of eyes looking through the things that are taking place online will give you, to quote it, peace of mind that there aren't things happening in the dark corners of your devices that you can't see.
Yeah, exactly that. And like Jack says, from a deployment point of view, it's very straightforward. You're not having to sort of open up firewall rules, do all this type of stuff. It's from an IT perspective, it's a bit of a dream versus something like a web filter, as I've mentioned previously. You've got lots of services that need to be incorporated when you're looking at the sort of network topology. But with it being client based out to the cloud, obviously UK based, you're very straightforward. You can roll this out Jack does it constantly with the customers that we bring onto the service. You can do it in the space of an hour. And then things like management, getting an understanding of that. Again, we offer, you get training around how you would manage these things and whatnot. So, from a practicalities point of view, very sort of straightforward, in sort of very positive that it is straightforward and not a big sort of hassle to implement and manage and things like that. So one thing that we do offer specifically with our colleges, so what I do, I work with people who are interested with the service. And basically we offer a proof of concept for colleges because we understand it's a big sort of shift in culture and whatnot. And as much as we can sit here and say things that sound absolutely wonderful, I think the proof is in the pudding when it comes to seeing it work in your environment with students that and maybe high risk students that and seeing these type of alerts coming through. So we do offer a proof of concept. That's something that if you are interested in, obviously no non-committal. It is free because we will, we're happy to sort of bear the burden of a free trial in terms of costs because we believe in the service so much. And, if you see it working in your environment, send the alerts through to your DSL teams. There's no sort of better sort of situation than using it live essentially. So, you get full access to the service. So it's not just a case of it's scaled down in any form, but very much a case of, we can do your whole estate. If you want to do, sort of a smaller portion of that estate, we can do that. You can link it into CPOMs and My Concern as well. So again, nothing scaled back. Obviously something that from our perspective, we're happy to talk about sort of post this webinar. So just wanted to sort of mention that we do offer a proof of concept for this, so you can get a full feel for the service. And we can, if you're interested, we can talk about details after this and set up maybe a follow-up call. So we've got our final poll. So this is for a demo. So essentially, would you be interested in sitting down, having a bit more of a sort of a detailed conversation on how it can help in your environment and everything like this, and how the safeguard and sort of procedures work at present? So I'll launch that. I'll just give that 30 seconds just to see what people think. Okay, thank you for that one. We'll just move on to, obviously we've been answering questions as we've gone along, but essentially, we're nearly out of time there, so just conscious of that. But does anyone have any sort of questions that they want to sort of specifically ask outside of what they can see on the screen? You want to drop it in the Q&A? I think we've touched that. Is monitoring scalable for larger maths should be colleges? We've talked about the scalability. How much information can moderators see on a student? Jack, I think you can answer that one.
Yeah, they can see what the student has typed recently. They can see recent alerts raised against a student, and they can see the screenshots that have been taken recently as well. So yeah, good rich contextual information to inform that analysis of how serious that should be.
Yeah, another question come through. So how long does it take to deploy? So yeah, basically, as I sort of mentioned, you've got, Jack can roll this out with you from a client point of view within an hour, and then basically what you can do is then set up some training with the safeguarding side of things to have access to the dashboard, the portal, and the DSLs can get an understanding of the alerts coming through and things of that nature. So very, very quick. Put it this way, if we could have it all rolled out by the end of today type of thing, if you were in a situation like that. So it's not sort of reliant on understanding the topology of your network when it comes to installing this service, because it is cloud-based. Anything else? So how are the colleges budgeting for this? So as you can appreciate, if there's no budget, they're going to governors, telling them, building a case for it, essentially trialing it, and then basically, having the proof of concept, which is essentially pushing through, the eventual purchase. So, once people go to trial, they see the true scope of the service, and then at this moment in time, 10 times out of 10, people will move to the service full time. So it's sort of they're trying to they're either getting money from sort of student services side, or safeguarding side, maybe it's IT, or just basically asking for budget to put something like this in play when maybe they've got things like Ofsted coming up and whatnot. So yeah, there are ways that are being sort of used at the moment by people who come on. Can Smoothwall Monitor be used to monitor staff devices? That's totally up to yourself. So if you want to monitor staff, we can do. Obviously, the legislation and things like that is more sort of bound towards students, but if I've got customers who will do staff monitoring as well, because again, it just comes down to the fact the device is owned by the college. Can Smoothwall Monitor be used on student devices at home? Yes, we've touched on that. So this will give you full safeguarding, 24/7 on off-site, no matter where the device is. So I think we touched on that one as we went along. So yeah, just conscious of time, I think we just hit the hour mark. So if there's no more questions, what you can do, obviously, if you want to sort of follow up with myself or Jack, you can email inquiries at Smoothwall. That will hit our lovely marketing team, and they will basically get us in touch with you, and we can arrange a call, whether that's with typically, I'll get sort of sessions with IT, or maybe bring safeguarding in, or IT first, then safeguarding, and whatever you need in terms of sort of presentations, we're happy to facilitate. So yeah, please do get in touch. If you want some market materials or whatever it might be, just a conversation, more than happy to do so. But I think for today, thank you for joining. Hopefully you found that useful as an introduction to digital marketing. But yeah, please do get in touch to, if you've got any questions or anything like that, or you want to book a follow-up session where we can sort of deep dive into the portal, what alerts look like, and you can get a feel for it, and then potentially, look at trials and things like that. Cool. Well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. No, it's a busy schedule, so I do appreciate you taking the time to join. And yeah, thank you very much, and hopefully speak to you soon.
Thanks all. Goodbye.
Thank you.